Those are,
All right. Welcome, everybody. This is the Lehigh County Authority Board of Directors meeting of June 26, 2023. Meeting is being held in a hybrid fashion, with some people being present in the boardroom and others on Zoom and others on the phone. So if you can't hear us, let us know. Raise your hand on Zoom if you can. Let's begin the meeting with a roll call of the Board of Directors.
okay, roll call, Brian Noggle,
Here.
Amir Kamili,
Here.
Ted Lyons,
Here.
Linda Rosenfeld. Here. Norma Cusick,
Here.
Kevin Baker, Jeff Morgan,
Here.
Sean Ziller.
Here.
Mark Ramus. We have 7 board members present.
Okay, thank you. Packages were distributed in advance to the board via emails as well as electronically, also available on our website. Anybody not received their packages? All right, let's begin the meeting then. With a review of the agenda. Any need for executive sessions?
So today I have no suggested change to the agenda and no executive sessions.
Moving on to the approval of the minutes from the June 12th, 2023 board meeting.
I move that the minutes be approved as presented.
Motion by Linda and seconded by Amir. Any questions? All in favor, say aye.
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 I,
But online saying aye.
Aye.
Jeff, Sean,
Aye.
thumbs up from Sean. All right. All right, thank you. Ayes have it. Motion passed. At this time, we open up the floor to any public comments on any topics that are not on the agenda. Does anybody have anything to offer?
No, thanks, Brian.
Yep, no thanks, Brian.
Thank you, Jenny and Brian. Moving on to action items, we have nothing under finance and administration, nothing under water. We do have one project under wastewater. It is the Spring Creek Pump Station upgrade. Seeking approval, it is the purple documents within the board package and digital pages 6 through 10.
We'll have Chuck Polk and Amy Coco handle that one.
Yep, I'll introduce the project and Amy will fill you in on the nuts and bolts details. This project is primarily an electrical project to upgrade the Spring Creek Pump Station, which is about 27 years old. We did an electrical condition assessment of the station earlier this year at the request of LCA Suburban Division Operations, who had some concerns about the controllers and the variable frequency drives. And this project is a design of an upgrade, primarily electrical to address the electrical concerns and extend the life of the station. So I'll let Amy take it from here.
Okay, so as part of the condition assessment that was done, the primary item that needs to be replaced are the VFDs. They're original to the station. They're only expected to have a service life of about 20 years. They're at 27 now. And most importantly, the parts for it are obsolete. Operations has difficulty getting things to repair it. So that's one of the items is to replace the VFDs. Also, the condition assessment recommended replacing the mini power center, which is located down at the station in the dry well of the station. It's corrosive environment, so they recommended that piece of equipment be upgraded as well. There's some other incidental things that they recommended that some of those operations is doing on their own. They have the ability to make those changes. Some of the non-electrical items are looking at replacing the hatches or making improvements to the hatches. That's something that DEP called out on one of their inspections. The engineer that we're recommending had some suggestions that, you know, things they could possibly do to limit the cost of that rather than a full out replacement. There's also replacing one of the weir gates in the station. One of them was replaced in 2017, 2018. This is going to replace the second one. And also to install a gate that goes from the station. The interceptor that bypasses the station, put a gate on that so that we could isolate the downstream interceptor and divert all the flow into the station. That will help with future I&I projects and inspections of that station. So we put out an RFP for 3 engineering firms to give us costs. Fort Lawson, Keystone Engineering Group, who did the original electrical assessment, and WRA. We got prices back, which are in the board memo. Fort Lawson was low. Again, they also had some recommendations that we liked in their proposal, some hopeful cost savings. So we're recommending that we go with them for $119,484. I don't know if there's anything.
I'd just like to add that this station is very critical in that if this station doesn't operate, we overflow manholes downstream. It was originally constructed as a relief facility for section of the Western Lehigh Interceptor that flows through Lower McCungie Township. And now it operates more often than just as a relief interceptor. It operates every day. Kind of like how Park Pump Station was constructed as a relief facility.
And to add to that, the electrical assessment did recommend improvements in now within the in the next 5 years, and then 10 years and 20 years. So we took from the assessment only the things that really are critical right now that need to be improved. Some things we're going to watch and see how they are. There are replacement parts available for some of the things, and then then the 10-year items we'll evaluate down the road when we see what's going to happen with the station.
Yeah, the Act 537 plan may dictate it will likely dictate the future of this station, whether it stays there, whether it gets relocated, whether it gets expanded. But this is to get us by to reduce the risk rating, the consequence of failure.
So basically maintains the existing service,
Yeah.
extends it central light. We had another project to please, I don't remember how our status on that was, but the relief interceptor going from the pretreatment plant to this pump station. And how does that impact? How does what we're going to do impact on that, or does it have to change after we make that installation?
It should change this station. The station will still see the same amount of flow. Where the other project you're referring to is what we call the Upper Western Lehigh Interceptor Pump Station in Forest, Maine, which we have to come upon a better acronym for that. but that thing we're going to bypass the Chestertown bottleneck and send it down to a manhole near Grange Park up in McCungie. So it won't change the flow that station is seeing.
Just remind me on the physical arrangements. There's a at grade structure right along the creek, and then there's a masonry building uphill.
Yeah. And
what's
right along the creek, it's like 10 feet away
from the creek? Yeah.
Yeah.
And what is that structure itself?
That's where all the mechanical stuff is housed. You have a dry pit and a wet well. And then there's what Amy was talking about, hatches. There's access hatches over the pumps and the various like valve chambers and stuff.
And that floods often, so.
Yes, and DP would like to see submergible hatches there, hatches that can withstand, several feet of water over top of that.
And the dry well does have some electrical equipment, but additional electrical equipment is up in the service building, which is kind of up the hill near the
There's a retirement.
retirement home, yeah.
It's 700 feet away or so.
The parking lot there.
Yeah, and part of this project is going to involve replacing the electrical feeders from that building down to the wet well, because they were assessed to be at the end of their service life as well.
The feeders are all below grade, and you don't have to dig up to do that, or is it just fine
Yeah,
pass through?
well,
Pipes?
I'm not sure if we can use
There's
existing.
spare conduit
Okay,
that we're not anticipating any excavation from.
okay, but that's good.
Okay, I'm done. Any other questions, board member?
Yeah, I have a quick question, and this is more for my own kind of curiosity. I know that the electrical condition assessment was kind of performed out of the concerns of operations staff at the LCA, but should they have not raised those concerns, is there a standard timeline for when a electrical condition assessment is completed, or is that largely are those born out of concerns raised by staff? Meaning, if this hadn't been conducted when it was, would there have been an electrical condition assessment upcoming?
I will add that operations, they have standard operating procedures under our computerized maintenance management system that they go out and maintain this equipment. And usually, in the course of those duties, if they see something that raises their concern, then that's when they bring it to us. As far as like your question about a regular condition assessment, it's sort of when the concerns get raised due to the CMMS system, due to the regular maintenance. That's usually when that triggers the need to do a more detailed assessment of whatever system they are concerned with. Maybe Andrew, I don't know if you have anything.
No, I'd say that's pretty accurate. Just to add to that, sort of the whole theory behind asset management, where we're trying to get is to have a more standardized approach to having these type of assessments and replacements going into the future.
These have been in there for 27 years and expected life of 20 years, right? So it should have come up on a radar at some point in time.
But we like to get our money's worth.
All for that,
Yeah.
but they can risk assessments as to,
Yeah.
is it likely to fail, which is a critical component of our Western Seas system.
I'll just add that kind of jumping on Andrew's comment, which is right on the money. At our next meeting, in the first meeting in July, we will be providing an update on our strategic plan. Progress, and asset management is one of the 5 critical areas that we'll report on, which kind of dovetails into how we do this on a more global organizational basis rather than system by system or facility by facility.
Okay.
Thank you.
Good. Sean, you okay with that?
I'm good, thank you.
Any other questions, comments? Okay, we have a motion on the table that has been made and seconded. No, we didn't. We didn't. So, all right. Who would like to make the motion?
So moved.
All right. Motion by Linda. Seconded by Amir. And that is for capital project authorization design phase in a total amount of $176,484. That includes a professional service authorization to Board Lawson Engineering LLC for a total of $119,484. All right, construction phase on that. Any questions? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Ayes have it, motion passed. Thank you very much. Thank you. Amy, Chuck. Everybody got it that one. All right, moving on now. We're done with the action and discussion items. We have monthly financial review. Pressure's on.
I'll get your presentation up.
Actually, for the most part, it's pretty good, so it'll be quick, so.
No problem.
So we'll take a look at the financial results for May. We start with the summary report for the month. You will see that LCA finished on the positive side, pretty much driven by the fact that all three funds across the board were on the positive side. The forecast variance for LCA of $686,000 being favorable is again aided by the fact that all three funds contributed favorable variances as well. On the cash flow statement, all LCA finished on the positive side. Suburban Water, Wastewater and City Division all finished positive as well. And compared to forecast, we were also favorable across all three funds and in total as well. So this would be the third consecutive month that for the income statement and for the cash flow statement that we finished favorable to forecast across the board, both statements, all three funds and in total. So that's good. So on a year-to-date basis, pretty much a lot of green, same thing. We're positive in total on the net income with all three funds being on the positive side. Against forecast, we're showing favorable variances for all three funds in LCA in total. Same story on the cash flow statement. We are doing pretty well on the positive side with respect to all three funds and total LCA. And once again, all three funds and LCA in total are favorable to forecast. So we came into the month favorable for both income and cash flows. And looking at the results for May, we stayed the same way. So that's good. We carried a very favorable variance coming in and we're favorable coming out. Now, full year, a little bit different, got some things going on. Suburban Water, well, that's on the positive side and gonna look better than budget for net income. Suburban Wastewater, we think we're gonna be a little bit on the negative side. And as I'm going through the funds, we'll touch a little bit more detail, but we're gonna be down to budget about $2.5 million on the suburban wastewater side. City, positive in terms of net income, but down a little bit to budget. So LCA in total will be positive given the mix there. But we're going to be down to budget in total as a result, pretty much driven by the wastewater. However, cash flows. The way we're forecasted and what we've got forecasted says we should be on the positive side for all three funds. And we should be on the positive side of the budget variance. So that will look good. So it's more or less in the net income side. And we'll talk about it as we go on some of the other funds.
We're gonna get more into the suburban wastewater.
Yes.
Cause of all that.
Yes, we will. So in terms of suburban water, year to date, see that we're 81,000 favorable. If you look at the year-to-date net income variance graph, you see that operating revenue was down a bit, but we sure made up for that with much lower operating expenses. The revenue variances is pretty much attributable to lower tapping fees. On the operating expense side, we looked at a couple categories. We had lower G&A, we had lower water purchases, and depreciation and amortization being lower helped. So year to date, suburban water look good. Full year, we're saying will be about $199,000 favorable to budget. And we'll have higher operating revenues, we'll get some offset from higher operating expenses. We'll talk about some of the driving factors. But we do have inflation, and particularly in purification chemicals, which is kind of what we talked about last time we did the review. So we are getting some inflation hits that are above and beyond what we put in the budget. And this one will also have a little bit higher DNA at the end of the year, but overall, we'll still be on the positive side. As we look at cash flows, we expect to be about 19 plus favorable. You see, most of it's coming from cash from operations with some negative impact from slightly higher debt service and financing, slightly higher capex, and slightly lower investment income in this fund. It's still good news, and again, pretty much driven by the cash from operations. If you look at the cash flow full year, boy, that's a big variance, and that is pretty much a continuation and no erosion on the additional $3 million that we brought in on the suburban water loan that we took out last year. We took a higher draw this year. We didn't take anything last year. So the addition is $3 million. And right now that has not been eroded. So we're still good. Make sense? In terms of metrics, on this, suburban water is showing higher than budget target metrics. We think the year end will be higher than where we are now. So that'll be good. On operating ratio, same thing, higher than our budget target and an internal target. And we think will be a little bit less, but that'll still be above the budget target. So 2 for 2 on this, and days cash on hand, almost 350. That's good as well. So I will talk about wastewater. So we're saying that we're year to date, almost 252,000 better. We had higher operating revenues. Actually, operating expenses are favorable, and we get some favorableness from interest income as well. So year to date, we're in a good position with respect to forecast. When we start to look at income for the full year, the driving factor is, and I uncovered this when I was doing some analysis for the Reftelis regionalization that we signed up to do. We found a problem in the budget model, double counting some revenue. So we are not going to hit that double counted revenue, and that's worth about $2.5 million. So that's why we do forecasts, so that we know where we are. So yeah, double count revenue. Yeah, essentially, there's a lot of inter-fund transfers that go in and out where in this particular instance, from an accounting perspective, they get eliminated. Well, the budget didn't. So it erroneously built up a revenue that really isn't going to take place. So from a net income standpoint, it leaves us with a gap. From a cash flow standpoint, if we go to the next one, not as much of a gap. So we're favorable year to date on cash flows, mostly driven by cash from operations. Cash flow for the full year, I'm saying, will still be up because we are going to have some investments mature that we will not reinvest to make cash whole, because I'd like to keep the metrics on suburban wastewater good rolling forward. So that we don't have any issues because of the amount of 537 stuff we need to do. So I'm holding on to that cash and not going to reinvest it.
Has this happened before?
To be honest with you, it did. And like I said, I didn't catch it till I was doing an analysis for Reftelis where I had to do all these eliminations manually. And I said, this is not right. The budget's not doing it right. So when I went back in time, religiously noted that what we budgeted for revenue was never met. And so we're recognizing it now.
Is there, I'm beating something to death, but that's okay. Is there some, obviously your budgets are created and then they're checked, presumably they're double checked. And somehow this just hung in there and never.
This hung in there because it was very similar to prior years in terms of the revenue. And when you're looking year to year, you're saying if you got X dollars of revenue and it's only up a couple percentage points, well, it kind of looks legit until you find out that you're not legit. So we'll fix the model, recognize the shortfall in net income. I'm taking the steps to make sure that we don't suffer any cash flow decrement, because it's important for us to keep the metrics as we worry about having to finance a lot of things down the road. So
Just help me out. You just told me that if you look at year on year and there is a variance of 3 or 4%, everything's okay. But here you did not see a variance of 2 or 3%. You see a much larger variance. Is that correct?
if you're comparing budget to budget, no. If you're comparing budgets to actual, and that was where we went wrong. Does that make sense, what I'm saying?
So what was our last year? If you look at last year, this time compared to this year, what is the variance on our net income?
Last year to this year?
I'm just trying to see, is the math in my
Hold
head
on.
adding up or not?
See, I don't have the prior year in the variance.
That's okay.
Yeah, I will have to follow up on that one.
You follow what I'm going, I'm just trying
No,
to
no,
see.
I got you. I mean, he was sitting there going, so in other words, we said we were gonna get $21 million worth of revenue and we're only gonna get 18.5. So that's what I said. The only thing I can do is adjust the cash.
No, I understand that.
No, but I'll be happy to take a look at, let's just call it a 5-year comparison.
Okay,
And I'll send that to you,
thank you.
because I don't have all the 5 years.
No, I understand.
It certainly warrants revisit of the process for checks and balances.
Absolutely. I mean, but
Sounds like you have it in place.
to be honest with you, this is the one fund where there are just way too many, I'll call it intra-fund activities, and somewhere along the line, we have to sort of not worry about eliminating, take them out of the picture. So,
Other questions on that?
so that's the wastewater story, and we want to go ahead to
Yeah.
the city.
Yeah, no, I was just gonna say also, I think if we look over time, we've always had a lot of variances
There's-
in revenue for suburban water because there is all this back and forth piece. It's a little difficult to model, but it's a good catch on his part.
Is the new system, hopefully we're getting, does it help to, I don't know, I don't know what the system's gonna look like, well, since you are putting the structure together, is there a safeguard that you can put in place to, obviously the system sometimes is fixed, not too much flexibility. Is that something we can do to prevent that happening?
Depending on how much of the budget we can put in, you're talking about munis.
Yeah.
Depending on how much of the budget and how the calculations that we can put into munis, there could be some safeguards built in. It is an Excel-based calculation now, and
Okay.
this is something that came back to haunt us.
A new ERP system would help, yeah.
Yeah, and again, in fairness with the ins and outs with a lot of them, part of the problem that you run into is net income doesn't get persuaded because there's ins and outs. You might have blown that one, and then you find out treatment and transportation is down by $2 million, so everything looks good again.
And I was gonna add on that as well. So we're doing the Munis project, software project. At the same time, we're doing this 537 evaluation and looking at cost sharing and the intermunicipal agreements. And that's really the driver for all of these complex ways that we share costs. If that process through the intermunicipal agreements gets smoothed out and handled differently, then that will make this process easier to track.
Yeah, I mean, that's why I said the best way is to get that out of the picture. But you guys, count on me to deal with the complex, and this particular one didn't do a very good job on it, so. Thank you. So in terms of.
Does that mean we take it out of your paycheck? The fix?
So on the metrics, these are a little bit lower. We're lower than target so far in debt service coverage, but we're talking 10 something versus an internal target of 1.20. We think we'll finish at 9.20. So no worries there. Operating ratio down a little bit to the targets, better than the internal target. And we think that the fiscal year will finish it right around the internal target. And as I talked about with the investments, we're at 290 days cash on hand, and I would like to keep that up there. Okay, on the city side, we look good with respect to income. We should be up by $353,000. We did have a negative variance on operating revenues, so we're a little bit unfavorable on the operating revenue side. And on non-operating, interest income, we're making up for that and then some. So that's good. And interest expense was lower as well. So pretty much what made the city favorable year to date so far has been non-financial activity. In terms of full year, we expect to be down a little bit to budget. And I can tell you that is because depreciation and amortization is going to run a little higher. It's a non-cash item, but that's going to be higher for the year than we originally budgeted. So.
I have a question. In the city division, I'm looking at your non-operating income expense, in this case, interest expense. Why would there be a variance there?
Well, it depends on what's really happening with accretion on the Series B bonds. And that's kind of a tough thing to predict. And the second part is what's happening to the, I'll call it accretion again, or non-cash interest on the liability, depending on discount rates. And that's what drives that. So that becomes an interest expense that's tough to gauge when you're doing
This is the interest expense on the bonds, is that correct?
this would be the interest expense of the bonds.
Wasn't that pretty much fixed? I mean,
No, actually on the accretable bonds, that changes on a yearly.
excuse me, what bonds?
The Series B bonds, the accretion on the bonds, the value of the bonds change, so the interest expense changes as well. And that's tough to predict when we're doing the budget in October.
Thank you.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. So we talked about the income, cash flows, looks good year to date. Again, driven pretty much by financial activity, interest income, and we think that for the full year that we'll be better than budget as well. And that will be as a result of slightly higher operating revenue against a little bit lower operating expenses. So that'll come from the operating side. Metrics, they all look good across the board. Debt service coverage ratio better. Year-to-date operating ratio better, and days cash on hand almost 300. Scorecard, well, we're in double digits with both of them out of 14. So one's 13 out of 14. 11 out of 14 and 12 out of 14. So, and I'm assuming that y'all like the fact that we put that in the pack and put it on the second page. So, I mean, these scores look good for where we are year to date, so.
Starts us off on a positive frame of mind.
Yeah, that number looked good, so it does. So a couple of things, in terms of capping it all. So the year-to-date net income and cash flows across all three funds and LCA positive and favorable to forecasts. We saw that. I talked about 3 consecutive months where we're positive or where we're favorable to forecast across all three funds and LCA. Year-to-date operating expenses are favorable for all three funds and LCA, despite the ongoing inflationary pressures, and we are seeing some. Ongoing, talking about inflation, we will see some more pricing inflation on chemicals and supplies. We are probably on an ongoing basis going to continue to see interest income coming from higher rates going on. I said when we looked at suburban water, the 3 million that we took in additional is pretty much still not being eroded at all in suburban water, so that's good. And we talked about suburban wastewater net income against unfavorable or an overstated budget is going to be unfavorable, but we are compensating on the cash flow side. Okay, now for my next dance. I think given the consultations I've had with Concord Financial and looking at the economic activity that's going on in the US, in the fact that our remaining 49% of the 2013 A series, remember we financed 51% out of the picture in 2020. So there's still 49% left and they're now callable on 9/1. I think given the economic climate right now, it might be a good idea to think about and start the process of refinancing them to be able to do a bond issue in September. What's in it for us is at this point in time, it would reduce our debt service payments on a net present value basis by $5.4 million. So that's, that's enough to capture my interest. And the only thing that I'm concerned about is these things take a little bit of time. There's a lot of things that have to be done on the city. You start with an offer, an offering statement, and then we've got to get appraisals done. Then there's notifications to a lot of people on, what we need to do. You got to get bond councils involved, and I guess what I'm proposing is that's today I would do this. However, the Fed comes in and raises rates by 0.50 basis points at the next meeting. It will take that $5.4 million and make it -3. And then it's not worth it.
And could you, for my benefit, kind of walk us through what this means, like on an individual bond? I'm not good at this macro stuff. So you say financing of 49%. The remainder of the books are callable. This means that someone who holds the bond, or we can call it that.
We can call them back on September.
And retire the bond
And retire.
and reissue a new bond to that bondholder,
That is,
whoever he, she, or it is.
yes, that is correct.
So if someone holds $1,000 bond, paying X% interest, we can call that back and say, here's a new bond paying Y% interest.
That's correct. Right. And that's essentially what we're doing with this. What we would be attempting to do is, and then if you remember the remaining 2013 bonds were out there at a 5.5% interest rate.
So right now, we can reissue a bond at a lower interest rate,
a lower interest rate.
but we have to go through a bunch of hoops to do that.
Yes, and so what I'm really saying is, it's enticing to me because of the $5.4 million savings. What's not enticing for me is to go really fast and have everything done and then the feds just bounce us out of the water.
What's the term of these bonds? How long are they?
Maybe 30 years.
So the Fed discount rate or whatever they're calling this even affects a 30-year bond going out.
Yes, oh, yes, most definitely. So what I'm suggesting is that I've been taking temperature on wanting to do this, but doing it slowly in case we have some things that are done that will carry forward if we have to stop. That's kind of the way I'm trying to approach it.
Ed, it's Jeff. I have a question for you, and maybe I'm completely lost, but were these bonds taxable or non-taxable or?
These are non-taxable. These are tax exempt bonds.
Oh,
And
okay.
We would replace with tax exempt bonds as well.
Okay. Do we have taxable ones anymore or are they gone?
Yes, back in 2020, the 51% that we retired were retired with taxable bonds.
Okay, thank you.
They're not callable right now, so they're kind of out of the picture.
What rate are those bonds? Do you recall?
Oh, they were 3.65 or something, 3. Yeah, they were very lucrative when we did this, because I mean, the net present value of savings was what, 20-some million, if I remember right. Yeah. So that's my idea, so.
Okay, it sounds like proceeding cautiously is the appropriate thing. That the Fed have been raising the rates constantly and predicting more in the future, but
Well, they took 1 month off.
took a month. That was nice. Okay.
Okay, any questions?
Board questions? Any questions? Thank you, Ed. Okay, moving on to the monthly system operations overview. Digital board package is page 24 to 25. It's the last white sheet in our package.
Andrew and Chris.
In front of you have the May 2023 operations report. The water production for May is going up as it typically does in summer months. Wastewater treatment, this goes for Klein's Island, the pre-treatment plant, and all of our small water systems. They have been very consistent the past few months, so no increases or decreases. As we move further down, total precipitation, we only had 0.24 inches of rain in May. That is somewhat of a concern. However, now that we hit June, we seem to be making some of that up. However, in June 15th, the DEP did do a drought watch. With that being said, LCA has asked all customers to voluntarily decrease water usage by 5 to 10%. There were no NOVs issued. However, we did have one bypass, and that was at our Heidelberg system. Towards the end of April, we did have a fairly large rainstorm come through. With that being said, if we bypassed from 5.1 to 5.5, and that was about 103,680 gallons. See, there are no injuries or emergency declarations. We had reservoir 1 offline, and this is sort of, just want to pull up the slide, so I'll share some pictures. So back in, actually sort of started 2 years ago when there was some damage that was noticed on top of reservoir 1. In March 2022, we ended up taking the tank offline and inspecting the inside of it to see if there's any damage done structurally. As you can see, there's quite an extensive amount of damage there to the roof. It almost buckled, almost like a soda can type of issue, which was obviously not ideal by any means. They couldn't really give us any grave details on how well it could handle snow weight or anything. So we did want to take it offline, basically immediately. And that sort of follows into when we had the interconnect installed back in June of 2022. And if you just flip, yeah, this is actually from the center column, the brackets going out. Some of them were torqued over to the side, some of them were broken, obviously not ideal. So we did have it offline from August to about December of 2022. And that was to repair all of the metal work. They had then coated, well, sandblasted and coated the interior. Really hard to tell with these pictures, but this is still some of the damage. You can see some of the beams actually shifted. And here's when they were cutting off some of the damaged roof panels. They ended up welding new ones back in. And then if you go to the next one, this is all nice and pretty inside after it was sandblasted and coated internally. We could not do the exterior coating in the wintertime due to the temperature. So we ended up putting the tank back online, and then it was taken back offline back in March or April. And we had the outside coated. So here is the finished work, much better. And also, as you can see on the top, I forgot to point it out in the first picture, but there's additional vent there now. We believe that some of the damage was created by like suction, and then you have a vacuum. They did mention that the original vent may have been a little undersized. So that's sort of the running theory. So we did install an additional vent up there to alleviate any future issues. Yep, that's reservoir one. Anyone have any questions about that?
Good job. They had to take it offline the second time because the water inside would affect the
Yeah, you
the
can.
application of the coating on the
Correct,
outside.
yeah, due to the condensate, it just won't bond correctly. Then on the second page, any water or wastewater non-compliances. If you follow down Heidelberg, the bypass was listed with the volume, and then we did have a few permit exceedances, some relating to that bypass, and then we're also upgrading some of the instrumentation. We had some difficulties and hiccups during that process. Should all be worked out now, so hopefully that does not repeat itself. Sand Spring, once again, sort of getting tired of talking about this one, but we did have 7 permit exceedances, mainly relating to nitrogen and ammonia removal at the facility. We are starting to see some improvements now that the weather has been more consistent, but we're still not in a great place at this time.
We'll continue to ask the question of, have you heard from the DEP yet?
I have not heard from the DEP yet. The latest that I heard was about a month ago, and he told me that they have not even reviewed our compliance plan at that time. He did have a meeting with, I believe it was the EPA in June, did not give me an exact time frame. And the conversation would be brought up at that time. So honestly, I would not expect any news back from the DEP for probably another month or so.
All right, any questions for Andrew? All right, thank you. Okay, staff comments. Want to tell us about your Toronto adventure?
I can, sure. It's,
Did anything significant come out of that you know, worthy of turning on the board? I guess that's the question.
So there's always just so much to learn, and so many people to meet and never. That was probably just broadly the key thing. I was able to attend Water Utility Council meeting that was held during the conference, where we talked quite a bit about upcoming changes to the lead and copper rule, which we're anxiously awaiting for that to happen and to see how that changes what we might be doing with lead and copper. We also spent quite a bit of time talking about the low-income water assistance program that was a one-year federal program that came out of some of the COVID relief packages. That program is essentially done, although there's a little bit of money that's still kind of being dispersed out to customers, low-income customers, but it's not a permanent plan. So American Water Works Association and Water Utility Council is working on some proposed legislation to propose that become a permanent program. So that was some really good feedback and good conversation.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, we had two other staff members. Chris was able to attend along with one of his supervisors in the field services department and continue to encourage broader participation because there's just so much at these big conferences that one person, two people, even three people can't possibly see it all.
I think the board has discussed that in the past, that we appreciate you attending those things. I think it's important to keep up with the others as well as learn what they're dealing with. Question is, do any board members ever attend those conferences from other utilities?
Typically we've seen board member attendance more so at the PMAA conference, the state conference, because there's more legal and organizational stuff that's specific to municipal authorities that's covered in that conference. At the national conference, you don't see quite as much of that. In the bigger cities like Philadelphia has a water commissioner and it's an appointed position, but it's a full-time job. And so you might see people like that attending those conferences.
How many attendees were
10,000.
there? Wow.
Okay.
Yeah, we'll take over the city. Next year it'll be in Anaheim, California. And the sister organization, I say sister, just they're not really related, but on the wastewater side is the Water Environment Federation. Their annual conference is always in October. I have not been to it, but I hear it's at least twice the size of American Water Works. So the drinking water side and the wastewater side together, there's a lot of us doing this good work.
Maybe we get one of the board members to attend the PMA.
Yeah.
Conference next coming up.
Actually, that one would be a great one to think about because it's somewhat local. This one is coming up in September at the Kalahari Resort in the Poconos. So even if some of you wanted to attend just for a day to check it out and see if it's valuable.
They have it in February in Florida, I think. Get more
Well,
dates.
September in the Poconos can be quite nice. Right. Thank you.
Okay, all right, thank you very much. Solicitor comments.
No comments, thank you.
All right, any public comments on any topics whatsoever?
No, thanks, Brian.
Yep, no comment here, thanks.
Jenny and Brian for attending. Board member comments on any topics that you want to bring for us? All right, there will be no executive session, so this meeting is now adjourned. Thank you very much, everybody, for attending.
Thank you.